Wolf Pack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with your Week 13 waiver wire. Only 2 more weeks until your fantasy playoffs, and certainly not the most explosive waiver wire we've ever seen, but a bunch of names that really could help you make that final push. And certainly with bye week Armageddon here, as people are terming it, it is brutal with 6 teams on bye, including the Bills, the Ravens, two of the top offenses in the NFL. We're going to need to find some replacements. We're going to need to get some people into these lineups. So let's dive on in, Wolfpack, to a very important waiver wire here as we get closer and closer to your fantasy playoffs. The first check, and I know not in my leagues, I get it, but Zach Moss, you have to, before going after anyone else I talk about, double check if Zach Moss got dropped in your leagues. Given that Jonathan Taylor is going to have a surgery on his thumb, he's expected to miss at least 2 to 3 weeks right now, and they might avoid putting him on the IR as the latest report, but even just 2 to 3 weeks of Zach Moss, he's going to be a bona fide RB1 for that span. You just look at from weeks 2 through 5 when Jonathan Taylor was out and Zach Moss was healthy. 98%, 76%, 81%, and then 80% of the snaps. And how did he do with that? 21, 23, 7, and 34 fantasy points. The running back 10, 5, 34, and 2 in that 4-game stretch, rather. We could get a similar 2 to 3 game stretch here down these last couple games, pushing you into your fantasy playoffs. So go check, see if Zach Moss is out there in your leagues, because he is going to be a top 12 running back for however long Jonathan Taylor is out. This is a team running the most plays per game in the NFL, and tons of that volume is going to the running back. So you have to go see if Zach Moss is out there before anything else. And if he is, you bid 100% of your FAAB. You do not ask any more questions. You do whatever it takes to go get Zach Moss. Other than that, though, Wolfpack, we're now going to dive into those guys out there in less than 50% of Yahoo leagues is where I get these metrics. So let's check on those now. If you don't mind and you enjoy what you're hearing, that thumbs up button, those likes, those shares, the retweets, all that stuff, it really does help us get out to more people. We're closing in on 4K. It would really mean the world. If you enjoy what you hear and you're new around here, the sub button, or at minimum, just that like, would really go such a long way for us. Let's continue on. Before we get into that top 10, we're going to talk about a few tight end streamers that you want to look at. I know a lot of people, myself included, are dealing with some tight end buys this week. Gerald Everett hauled in all 4 of his targets, 43 yards and a touchdowns against the Ravens last week. Their schedule actually does soften a bit, getting Denver, the number 1 matchup for tight ends coming up this next week. We know Parham is always a threat to vulture him, but I really like looking at Gerald Everett right now. K. Dotton also, as we know, one of the high-end route runners at the tight end position, top 5 in route share. A decent amount of targets as well. Another 4 this week, 4 catches, 45 yards. Low ceiling. The guy just kind of stinks. But ultimately, volume is really hard to come by at the tight end position, and we know K. Dotton will be running a ton of routes and seeing 4 to 6 targets regardless of it. And given that Indianapolis matchup, it could be a solid spot for him. Tucker Kraft filling in for Luke Musgrave has now scored a touchdown. He's a beast. I think he honestly is as good, if not better, than Luke Musgrave. I saw him D1 AA. Holy cross, shut him out. They faced this team, the Jackrabbits, over there in the playoffs, and he was a beast. A lot of people comparing him to Dallas Goedert, who also came from that program, South Dakota State. I really like Tucker Kraft. I really like how often this team likes to use their tight ends. And so he could also be in play. I get the Chiefs, not the best of matchups. They're actually softer against tight ends than they are receivers. But my favorite tight end streamer, other than one of my top waiver wire pickups of the week, if he might be out there for you, you got to look at Juwan Johnson. He's out there in nearly every league. He had 7 targets, 4 catches, 45 yards, and was playing the slot on a season-high 28 of his 34 snaps this week. He ran a route on 34 of their 40 dropbacks. Meanwhile, Taysom Hill just had 12 of those routes as well, so a really nice bounce back in terms of share. We had Chris Olave getting hurt. We had Rashid Shaheed also getting knocked out. Both those guys seem doubtful at best to play this week. So Juwan Johnson could easily lead this team in targets, with the next man up being Lynn Bowden, A.T. Perry, who both maybe in really desperate deep leagues could be waiver wire plugins themselves. But I like to look to Juwan Johnson, a big wide receiver, a converted wide receiver that's labeled as tight end. I could see him having a really, really big day here in Week 13 against a Detroit team that's getting dusted in their secondary these last few weekend streamers to help you out before I crack into that top 10. But let's break on in. And again, that thumbs up if you enjoy it, Wolfpack, would mean a lot. Michael Carter, shockingly, 2% rostered, is actually cracking my top 10 this week. 83% of his snaps were passing plays this week, but he really inherited that role from James Conner. 27 of the 71 snaps went to Michael Carter, and that was actually just 3 less than James Conner. He saw 38.1% of the running back touches compared to 47.6% for James Conner. Now, maybe this is just a death knell for Conner, and yeah, I don't know that you can trust James Conner moving forward as a clear-cut running back too, as he had been ranked almost every single week. But Michael Carter, one, you got the handcuff benefits. If something happens to Conner, it's clear that Carter, at least for this 1 week, has leaped over Amari DiMarcado. But two, you got that passing game role on lock, it seems right now, which is, again, why James Conner is someone you can't necessarily roll out there with utter confidence. I get in week 13 by Mageddon, you probably have to rely on Conner where you have him. But this was a huge knock in his value moving forward. And again, 7 PPR points for Michael Carter, actually not horrible. Don't know that you can trust him in anything other than full PPR, but saw 4 targets, had 4 catches, didn't do a ton of work with them. He's always been okay, though, with the Jets. Really liked him coming out of college. Was one of the best pass-catching backs in that class. I could see him carving out a meaningful role in a Kyler Murray-led offense, which is worth, at minimum, the handcuff with benefits type of value here. A guy I've mentioned quite a few times on this show, but I just wanted to highlight Jameson Williams one more time, given that we've now seen back-to-back weeks with 60% or higher routes. He's only cleared that twice in his career, and they've been the last 2 weeks. So I get it. Jameson Williams, he'll just never get it done. Remember, this was the game changer that a lot of people had as their number 1 receiver in a very impressive class just 2 years ago. And I get that he has not fully realized that ceiling, hasn't been close here, but 2 catches on 3 targets, 44 yards and a touchdowns a week ago. Then he has a 50-yard bomb this last week. Sure, again, 3 to 4 targets a week aren't going to get it done for you. It's going to be tough to trust, but I keep looking ahead at the schedule and the way they're getting decimated right now, the Lions, they're going to keep getting bombed. You got the Cowboys on deck in the championships and multiple shootout narrative games coming up here, all of them in domes in your fantasy playoffs as well. So I just think there's a chance 60% of the routes becomes 80%, 4 targets become 8, and suddenly you're looking at a potential league winner here. So if you have the room to stash, I get it's a tough week to do it, but I do think Jameson Williams could be a meaningful stash moving forward. But I'm even more intrigued, despite a week 13 bye. You can't use him this week, but I really like what I saw out of Jayden Hyatt, just 3% rostered, another guy worth 2 to 5% of your FAAB, in my opinion. 5 catches on 6 targets, 109 yards this last week. The only Giants receiver to clear 100 yards this season. Tommy DeVito's preferred deep target. He had a whopping 65%, Jayden Hyatt, of the air yards. And despite a really impressive 20.83 ADOT, 83% of his targets were deemed catchable. That's really impressive to be in that type of deep role, to account for that much of the air yards and have a almost 21 ADOT and still see 83% catchable targets. 26% target share led the team. 26% targets per outrun led the team. 19 PPR points certainly led the team and is one of the highest marks we've seen out of a Giants receiver all season. We got a blazing fast 4.4 40-yard dash, 91st percentile, all training camp. Jayden Hyatt was a highlight reel player, the Litnikoff Award winner. He had a 6-catch, 207-yard, 5-touchdown day against the Crimson Tide. This guy can get it done. A lot of people labeled him as only a deep threat, but we saw the moves, the jukes, the after-the-catch ability throughout his performance against the Patriots. I was watching every snap of that game, and he just popped off the page, as he really has every time he's been used. Now, the next 2 weeks are pretty tough for Hyatt after the bye. Green Bay, 23rd, New Orleans, 27th, and points allowed to receivers. But then after that, the most points allowed in Philadelphia first, and then the Rams, a middle-of-the-road matchup for wide receivers. So maybe Hyatt, if he keeps getting this type of route share, 70% or more, I really like him moving down the stretch, a talent that I buy in and believe. Everybody knows my love for Jeff Wilson, number 7 on this list, 17% rostered, worth about 5 to 8%. I'm not saying go nuts and go bid it all to get Jeff Wilson, but given Raheem Mostert's injury history, he's stayed healthy all year. It seems like he's well overdue for that. Not hoping for, not wishing for an injury, but we know Devon Achane can't stay in the lineup. We know Raheem Mostert has his struggles. And given that Salvin Ahmed is now on the IR, it's clear that Jeff Wilson's at minimum the number 3 running back here. And if either of those guys miss time, the number 2. And if both of them miss time, we could be looking at the featured back in one of the most productive run schemes the NFL has ever seen. Certainly one of the top this year. Last week in the number 2 role, 11 carries, 56 yards, 3 catches, another 17 yards. So 14 touches, 73 yards. Really solid day at the office for Jeff Wilson. Ended up being the running back 26 despite only playing 33% of the snaps. And just remember last year when he got traded to the Dolphins, he was the number 1 running back for his first 3 games, 16.2, 22.3, and then in a half, 12.2 points for Jeff Wilson before getting hurt. He came back from injury just a couple weeks later and then had 11, 10.6, 9.4, and 10.6 points. Earth-shattering? No, but all of those were running back 2 or better performances. So should he, if injury strikes and he has to start, I think Jeff Wilson could really do some damage, especially over these next 3 weeks when he gets Washington, Tennessee, the Jets, all top half of the league matchups. The semis in the ship, Dallas and Baltimore, really tough for running backs. So ultimately, probably wouldn't be relying on Jeff Wilson for there. But if he gets a start in these next 3 weeks, or if you're desperate in this week 13 against Washington, I really think Jeff Wilson could be a great plug and play, even as just the number 2. If Achan's playing and he's back to the number 3, Jeff Wilson, probably not. But definitely monitor that injury report, see how he's doing. And at minimum, just stash him anyways. Now, running back that's on bye, but really, really impressed with his week 12 performance here. Roschon Johnson, 23% rostered. I think he's worth 12 to 20% of your FAAB, given that he took over the reins of this backfield. 10 carries, 35 yards, 40 yards on 5 catches, 15 touches, compared to just 6 for Khalil Herbert. That was the key here. 75% of the snaps going to Roschon Johnson, compared to 22% for Khalil Herbert there. And ultimately, we got 14% target share and 49% of the routes going to Roschon Johnson as well. Was it a monster day? No, but 12 PPR points, running back 21 finish, and certainly gets that narrative of they want to get an extended look at their hand-selected rookie running back in Roschon Johnson over these last few weeks. Now, granted, we don't know what's going to happen when Donta Foreman does return. And also, it is a rough schedule when he gets back. 3 of the top 10 worst matchups for fantasy running backs in the Lions, Browns, and Falcons after that week 13 bye. So it's not the prettiest schedule, but any running back seeing 15-ish touches is worth considering here. And Roschon definitely has that potential with this team wanting to see what they've got in their guy. Moving forward, Curtis Samuel is going to highlight a next string of wide receivers here. My number 5 waiver wire ad of the week, 29% rostered, 12 to 20% of your FAAB for me. Well, we had a quiet about 3-week stretch here for Curtis Samuel, including an ejection against the Giants there. But bam, this last week on Thanksgiving Day, 12 targets, 9 catches, 100 yards, 19 fantasy points in PPR leagues, a whopping 36.4% targets per route run. He's only seen 1 less target than McLaurin across their last 2 full games. He out-targeted McLaurin on Thanksgiving Day. And it kind of makes you remember over weeks 4 to 6 this year, 18.2, wide receiver 12, 18.5, wide receiver 14, and then 14.2 points for wide receiver 23. He had a really, really nice stretch run for the Commanders here, and we're seeing Sam Howell starting to get the ball out quicker. Only a 7.1 ADOT, which has gone down over week 6 to 9, which suggests Sam Howell trying to protect those sacks, get the ball out quicker. Definitely looking towards his slot guy more and more often. So Curtis Samuel, somebody to definitely check for on your week 13 waiver wire here. Now, maybe the potential to be the number 1 waiver wire guy this week, but I just don't know if he's going to yet return, is Josh Palmer, 27% rostered. Still, even with the questions on whether or not he's going to be back, I still think Palmer is worth 20 to 25% of your FAAB, maybe even more. Given after Mike Williams' early week 3 exit, Palmer had 4 full games before he himself got hurt. And in those games, he had 14.6, 10.7, 10.0, and then 18.3. Was really starting to cook, 133 yards in his last full game of action. 7 targets, 5 catches in that span for, again, 133 yards. Was the wide receiver 10 in his last full game out. And nobody has stepped up in his absence, especially not Quentin Johnson, one of the most disappointing players. Everybody wants to rag on the guy, and deservedly so. He's been horrendous. And they really need a number 2 to step up with Keenan Allen continuing to shoulder massive workloads each and every week. And he's getting it done. But they really were relying on Josh Palmer, and his absence has sorely been felt with 3 straight losses here. I'd really think Palmer could walk right into the number 2 role in a very productive passing game, one of the best with Justin Herbert here. The schedule's met. Coming back this week against New England would be the best matchup left here. 9th most points allowed to points. Denver has really stiffened up as a defense. They're only now giving up the 26th most points to wide receivers. He gets them twice, weeks 14 and then your fantasy championship 27th. But ultimately, the Raiders and Buffalo, middle-of-the-road matchups as well. So the schedule's not bad here for Josh Palmer. Again, that production was really impressive when Mike Williams was out and he had that clear number 2 role on lock. So if we knew Palmer was going to be back, I might even have him at number 1 on this list. We don't know for sure, but he's eligible to come back this week, and the early buzz was positive on that front. So we shall see how Palmer's doing, but they clearly need him, and he could be right back into that number 2 role for the Chargers. Right behind him, Odell Beckham, number 3 wide receiver ad of the week, 48% rostered, 25 to 35% of your FAAB. Again, another guy on bye this week, but I think he could be that true dominant weeks 14 to 17 league winner for you. Let's dive into why. So despite not having a full-time role in week 12, only 12 routes on 36 dropbacks because of that shoulder injury. We kind of knew going in it was going to be weak and ultimately didn't do a ton of damage. But the big thing we did see was a whopping 41.7% of targets on his targets per route run, 30.3% of the team air yards, a third of the team's air yards, despite only playing a third of the team's passing routes for Odell Beckham. And he was looking good. I know the shoulder injury was an issue, and that's why he didn't play fully, but there was no real, if you watched it eyeball test-wise, didn't look any worse for the wear. We saw him coming in those slants, and he looked great. We talked about it last week. He himself saying, I finally feel healthy. I'm fully ready to go. It feels great right now. And so that was big for Odell Beckham. And now after this bye, Rams, Jacksonville, San Fran, and Miami, all top half matchups for wide receivers. 3 of those are in the top 12. This is a really nice schedule for Odell Beckham down the stretch here. And again, no Mark Andrews. We know that they're going to need to lean on somebody, and Zay Flowers certainly performed well in his first game without Andrews. And Isaiah Likely, also impressive. But given how highly targeted Beckham was, how good he looked on his limited routes, assuming that after the bye he gets himself fully healthy and is back to the 70 to 80% of the routes we were seeing for those 3 weeks before. And remember, 15 or more fantasy points in 2 of those 3 games as well, was a wide receiver 30 or better for 3 straight. We saw a really nice track record for Beckham leading into this game where he was limited. I could see him picking right back where he left off and having a really impressive stretch run to your season. But I would actually rank Jayden Reed as my number 1 waiver wire receiver of the week. This is your last call. He went up from 36% to 48% rostered. And if you haven't got in yet, if your league mates somehow haven't gotten in yet, what are we doing? Wide receiver 12, 11, and 21 across his last 3 games with 19, 19, and 15 PPR fantasy points. He's seen his routes in that span climb from 56% to 77% to 79% across those games. Last week, he tied his team season high, with 8 targets, caught 4 of them for 34 yards and a score. The big thing still involved as a rusher, 2 carries for 16 yards, including one of those carries coming in the red zone for Jayden Reed. We got those Debo-like comparisons of 2 weeks ago. We saw it again here. Remember, this is now a really impressive span here. In the past 5 games, the Packers have really been pushing the volume pace here. They have only one of those games below average play volume. The rest of them have been well above it. Jordan Love is really coming to his own over these last few weeks. Really impressed with Jayden Reed. Just a great player that seems to mesh better than any of the other receivers on this roster with Jordan Love. So he's my number 1 receiver ad, worth 25 to 35% of your FAAB should he still be out there. But Wolfpack, my number 1 waiver wire ad of the week. We're about to get to that, but one last call with about 25 of you here. Love to see it. Thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening just quickly getting through my waiver wire, guys. We'll get to all your questions in a second, but one last call for that thumbs up button. Help us get out to more people. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing. We're so happy to have you here with us. My number 1 pickup of the week, though, is Pat Freiermuth, right around 50% rostered, so decent chance he's gone in your league, but I personally had dropped him just a couple weeks ago after about only 40% of the routes. Just a few weeks ago, we saw that leap up, though, in Matt Canada's first game away. They finally get over 400 total yards of offense for the first time since Matt Canada was hired just 3 years ago. In fact, there's a funny tweet about how 400 yards of total offense the first game before Canada was hired, and then they were gone until this last one. For 3 years span, they've been in hell with Matt Canada, but finally back out of that. We saw a career at 278 yards for Kenny Pickett. If he can get there, we can finally start to trust more and more of these Steelers guys in our lineups. And I certainly think Pat Freiermuth, at minimum, seemed like the biggest beneficiary. Seeing first the snaps jump from 54 to just 60%, that was not a huge jump, but the routes going from 39% to 67% this last week. The target share going from 4% to 34% this last week. 11 targets, 9 catches, 120 yards. Both his first catches, 20-yard gains. Boom, this guy is in for a monster day here. 11 targets did lead the Steelers, as did 120, and more than double the next closest player on the squad. So great to see Pat Freiermuth finally emerging. It's a defense that just gave up 2 touchdowns to the tight ends against the Cardinals. We saw Tyler Higbee score twice against them. So it hasn't been the best of matchups all year, but Cardinals are starting to crumble a little bit there in the secondary. The rest of the games after that, all in the top 10, including another matchup with the Bengals, who Pat Freiermuth, smashed. So definitely the number one ad if you can find him in your waiver wire. Given how weak the tight end position, I put him above all the others. And Wolfpack, that wraps up my top 10 waiver wire pickups of week 13. As we always do, before we hit your questions, we are now going to move into our top week 13 defensive streamers for you. Starting at the top of the list, I have a hard time deciding who I want to go with between the Bucs and the Falcons. Both are in great spots, but I am leaning Atlanta given the matchup against the New York Jets. They've quietly been the Falcons' top 10 in pressure rate. The sacks just haven't fully been there. They get to the quarterback well, but the quarterbacks have been getting the ball away. But we're now talking about the Jets, the worst line according to Pro Football Focus, protection grade, and really everything here. And it's pretty easy to see with eyeballs how bad they are. Dead last in the AFC in total offensive yards, 30th in the league in scoring. They lead the AFC in fantasy points per game allowed to defenses, and they're rolling out Tim Boyle. How did that first game go? 21 points allowed ultimately to the Miami defense. They scored 21 points, given 7 points only scored by the Jets. 7 sacks. Their point total matched the sack total there. 2 interceptions, 1 TD, that infamous Hail Mary, the 99-yard touchdown return there. They have now, the Jets, given up 17 fantasy points per game to opposing defenses across their last 5 weeks. That is by far the highest mark in the span. So in the terms of what defense could be a bona fide league winner for you this week winner, I really think the Falcons have a good shot. They're coming off a game with a pick 6 of their own. Jesse Bates, an absolute monster. Won't be surprised at all if against Tim Boyle they rack up 4 to 5 sacks, at least a couple picks, and maybe a potential touchdown as well. But I do also really, really like the Tampa Bay Bucs, only 34% rostered right now. Their pass defense has been atrocious, and it's a big reason why since week 5 after their bye, they only have 1 win. They've really crumbled, the Bucs. But only the Jets and Giants have less passing success than the Panthers, who are 30th in total offense, 29th in total scoring. They've allowed the 4th most sacks in the league's 43. And the Bucs have 31 on the year. Pretty respectable. Top half of the league there in sacks. We've got the Panthers giving up the 4th most points to defenses on the year at home against this abysmal team that just fired Frank Reich, and maybe the new coach and buzz by gets him going. I don't think so. I think Bryce Young is garbage. I think this defense will swarm him and ultimately force at least a couple picks and at least 3 to 4 sacks. I love the Bucs at home this week, but I also love the Jags at home against the Bengals, and they get the Browning-led Bengals. That's the key here. Given what the Steelers just did, load up the box, stop Joe Mixon, 11 carries, 25 yards. I expect every single defense to follow suit these next few weeks. Browning got sacked 4 times. They had just 222 yards of total offense, barely many points on the board there. And the Jags have been phenomenal at taking away the ball. 20 takeaways, 3rd in the NFL. Josh Allen among the NFL leaders in sacks. I think it's going to be a very, very long day for Jake Browning and this Bengals team. And plus, if you stream the Jags this week, they also get Cleveland next week. So you get back-to-back bangers of matchups for the Jags. I also did want to shout out the Colts, who have shockingly 26, 16, and 11 fantasy points in their last 3 games. Titans aren't the best of matchups here. 14th most points allowed to D, but Will Levis sacked 11 times across his last 4. Colts rank 5th in the league with 36 sacks, 10th with 18 takeaways, 10th in total fantasy points among defenses. They've been playing really, really well. This one will be very game script dependent here for your Colts. Henry, it's not a great run D. Henry could just steamroll them and then really limit the amount of takeaway opportunities. But if they get in the right script, like we saw with the Bucs, put up 15 fantasy points against the same exact Titans team, they can get up early, the Colts, and force Will Levis to have to throw. I think the sacks, the turnovers will come in droves. But I did want to also shout out both Los Angeles teams, the Chargers and the Rams. Starting with the Chargers here, they're on the road, but they're getting the Patriots. They are just so horrendous. 6 and 7 total points in their last 2 games. They've given up 16 and 12 fantasy points to the defenses that they've been facing. No team has been worse across their last 3 games in terms of total yardage. Dead last there. Just 2. It's brutal. It's really, really bad. And sure, the Chargers, we get it. They're not a great team. In fact, in total yardage, they're giving up the most in the league. And they have just 2 combined fantasy points across the last 3 games. I get it. Not a phenomenal defense on paper, but we saw them put up 27 fantasy points facing the Jets in week 9. They had 8 sacks, 3 turnovers. We know when they get the bad offenses that this defense, which has talent, just coaching here, but when they have the right matchup, they can get it done. So I do really like the Chargers and also the Rams, who have really a low ceiling. They've only topped 10 points once this year, and 2 games above 6 fantasy points. So feels pretty capped here. But Cleveland is abysmal. 7th most points allowed to defenses, now without their number 1 receiver, Amari Cooper. And we just saw this Rams team only give up 14 points, had 4 sacks against Arizona. So this defense can start to pin their ears back, get after them. They played better as of late. So if you're really desperate, I could see the Rams or the Chargers. But definitely look to the Falcons first, then the Bucs and Jags second and third. And if you really need somebody after them, the Colts or both Los Angeles teams will wrap up my top week 13 defensive streamers. Alrighty, Wolfpack, that wraps up all my top 10 waiver wire pickups, all my defensive streamers. Please do consider that thumbs up button to help us get out to more people, new subs, all that good stuff. Let's hear what we got for you guys. Tunes, JT, oh yeah, you're getting crushed with the injuries. Andrews, JT, likely Addison, Shakir on by. It is a brutal week. I'm with you, Tunes. You saw my dynasty team. I mean, I'm going to have an absolute patchwork lineup in that league, dude. Any options for my wide receiver 3 and flex better than Dortch, Judy, or Dobbs? So I would say I hate Judy. You know that. I've never liked Judy. I think anybody I talked about tonight probably brings more to the table. But if Jayden Reed's out there, Odell, he's on bye this week, so probably not him. But check for Josh Palmer or Curtis Samuel as well. So I'd go Jayden Reed, Palmer, or Samuel, all better than Dobbs or Dortch. I like Dortch, especially if Michael Wilson is out. Really nice target share there. He's not on this list only because I don't know Michael Wilson's status there. But yeah, I like all of, again, if you need a starter this week, Reed, Palmer, and Samuel above Dobbs. I feel like Dobbs is kind of taking that back seat here to Jayden Reed, and then Christian Watson coming on too. So he seems to be the third now in this offense. He says, Toon says, should make the playoffs, but would like to move up and not be the last seed. Yeah. Ultimately, I feel like 6 seeds have good luck, though. Like the fantasy gods favor the scrappy 6 seeds. So I would not be overly concerned there. What's up, Bulldog? Good call on Kyron. I was a little skeptical about him coming back. Started him in 2 leagues after listening to you. Hell yeah. What a man that guy is. I posted it today. Out of all the running backs in the league, I think CMC is the only guy I'd rather have the rest of the season. So let's go. This is Todd Gurley. This is Todd Gurley back. Hey, Wolf, I hope all is well. Thoughts on playing Schultz this week against Denver? I lose Hawkinson to the bye. Should I be worried about Hawkinson in the future with Dawes? So, I mean, Dawes has been rough, but if he does anything well, it's target and absolute pepper the tight end position. So I'm not worried about Hawkinson at all in the future. I think Schultz is a fine stream this week. Denver giving up the most points. Normally it'd be a smash, right? But coming off a week where he only saw 2 targets, 1 catch, only played about 50% of the routes. I don't know what that was about. I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward, but it kind of came out of nowhere, this absolute drop in usage and target share and everything. So I'm a little concerned about Schultz, but again, Denver is one of the best matchups you can ask for tight ends. So something to consider there. 2-7 is back to 5-7. The dream lives to fight another week. Whew, there we go, Charlie. 3 straight wins. Let's go. Sneak into that playoffs. Be that scrappy guy. Worry about Geno versus Dallas, considering a super flex pivot to lock it. At least less int risk. Only needs a big player or two or a deal. Yeah, if Achane can go, I would honestly start him over Geno. I get it. If there's other quarterbacks out there, let me know. Because I still always prefer going quarterbacks. They still have the best bet to get to 14 to 15 points, which is a good week for a running back or wide receiver. So even a Pickett, let me know if there's any other guys out there, Charlie, that we could toss into that super flex. Wolf, do I trade Ayuk, Singletary, and Geno for JJ and Chuba? My other receivers are Hill, Dell, Daddy, Davis, and T. RBs are Jacobs, Kyron, and Achane. So Chuba does nothing. So it's essentially, are you going to sell the farm to get JJ? I don't know. I'm hesitant to say yes, only because Dobbs just looks so questionable these last few weeks. And what if JJ continues to just linger? Their playoff hopes, had they been fully in the playoff hunt and Dobbs been cooking right now, then yeah, I might say, yeah, let's do it. I feel like giving up on Ayuk, a great, beautiful playoff schedule here, just isn't a great move right now, given the questions on JJ. After Hill and Dell, too, your receivers have some big question marks. Davis, sure, the boom this last week, but who knows if T's coming back? Who knows if you can even trust him if he does with Browning? I probably don't pull this trigger. I don't hate it, but there's so much uncertainty around JJ. I don't know that. I can't guarantee. If we're going to report that, yes, he's going to be back after the bye, okay, yes, I would do the deal. It's Justin Jefferson. But otherwise, I think Ayuk is just set up for so much success. I wouldn't do it. DV Severe, full PPR, pick one, Swift, Harris, or Warren. I'd go Swift this week. I know the 49ers are a tough matchup, but decent receiving points allowed to running backs. It's just that Harris and Warren nightmare is tricky to navigate here. Given that down the middle split, it's tough. I'd rather just take the guy getting all the touches, DB Severe. Got a trade offer for JJ for Ayuk and Swift. Similar to what I was just saying to Giuseppe, I love Ayuk's schedule, DV Severe. I don't think I do it. I just don't know that JJ's coming back. Obviously, it makes great sense if you're going to get him, but I don't know that he's even going to come back. Dynasty have to drop one bye week filler. Do I drop Likely? Have Muth and Pitts, Mims, or Roshan Johnson? Man, I guess I'd drop Likely. As much as I like him rest of the season, dynasty-wise, he just doesn't have nearly as much value as the other guys. So I would definitely keep all the others. If I had to drop a second, I can't drop Mims. Dynasty-wise, he's probably too valuable, but I don't even know who else I would drop, though, like Giuseppe. They're all good for dynasty purposes. I guess Mims would be the next drop, but I really don't want to drop any of them. Wolf, hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Thank you, Dylan. I hope you had a great one as well, brother. Just my luck. As soon as I start victory lapping my JT. Omar, I know. Oh, can't have nothing nice. I mean, granted, at least two is the quarterback 23 in fantasy points across the last 4. It's not like he gave up, something massive, but yeah, that sucks. Hopefully he's back for your championships, though. Like and share, subscribe. Hell yeah, Giuseppe. Like, shares, retweets, subscribes, of course. Would love to have you guys continue to join that pack and help us climb. Likely. So I would go Everett in the T spot there. Dylan Adams. Wolf greater than Tom Brady. I won't take that, but thank you so much, Dylan. You're a legend. Confused how New England offense got worse. I don't know, Jaws. I have no idea. Horrendous. Ramondre rebound next year? Yeah, should, right? He still looks okay. Earlier in the year, I just thought he looked kind of sluggish. But these last few games, I really think he's started to look like the Ramondre of old. So, of course, if they can get a real quarterback here, yeah, I think that would greatly help his value. Wolf, I need a running back. Who should I get? I have Jay Cook on bye. Madison and Gus Edwards all on bye. So I tossed out a few earlier, Thomas. I think the only one – there's really almost nobody here out there that you can really stream. I think Rico Dowdle against the Seahawks could be in a decent spot. Plus, he's got the handcuff with benefits. I also cited Jeff Wilson, assuming Devon Achane is out, would be two guys that you can maybe stream. But let me know who's out there as the top projected guys, Thomas, because it is a tough week for that. Buenos tardes, Tomas. Do I keep playing Cup? Play my wide receiver 3 JSN? I think you got to keep going Cup. I know it's awful. I know it hurts right now. As soon as you bench him, Cooper Cup of old comes back. I don't think any of these guys are above Cooper Cup, like JSN or any of these waiver guys. It's not enough for me. I have Cooper Cup down in my wide receiver 15 to 20 range rest of the season and rankings this week. But JSN's not enough for me. That doesn't move the needle enough. Shane Franzen, thinking of trading Breece Hall. Targets I've considered. Yeah, I mean, if you can get any of those three, I would absolutely do it. I don't know that anyone wants Breece Hall right now, given how bad the Jets are. Any of those three would be a win. You want to know anyone I would value similar to above Breece Hall? Check out the rest of the season big board, rotostreetjournal.com, or our trade value chart, which comes out tomorrow, Shane. Would you drop Tajay Spears to pick up Keaton Mitchell? Yes, absolutely, Omar. How is Keaton Mitchell? Why don't you have him already? Got to pick up Keaton Mitchell, please. Please. Yes, go get Keaton Mitchell. Absolutely right now. I love Tajay Spears, but we just saw Keaton Mitchell. If I would have put him as the number one waiver wire pickup right under Zach Moss had I known he was out there in leagues. He just outsnapped Gus Edwards this last week and looked damn good doing it. I am in love with Keaton Mitchell. Who should I drop to bring back Jefferson? If he comes back, Robert. Kareem Hunt, T. Spears, or Sam Howell. Mahomes is your quarterback 1. I'm thinking Hunt there. How much upside is there really to Kareem Hunt? And I don't want Sam Howell out there for the rest of my league. And Tajay Spears, if something happens to Henry, we know the league winning upside. I would definitely drop Spears to get Moss, 100%. I love holding Spears, but yes, absolutely. And I would drop almost anyone to get Moss at this point. Juwan Johnson for week over the other terrible choices on the waiver wire? Yeah, I think so, Pete. Everett, Higbee, Conklin. Yeah, I think so, absolutely. Given all the injuries, you cite why, Peter. Everybody hurt. No Michael Thomas, we know that. Probably no Olave or Rashid Shaheed. He's a converted wide receiver that has proven chemistry, has gotten it done at 7 targets last week in Detroit. Not a good defense, not a good secondary at least. So, yes, I think so. Yes, absolutely drop Spears for Moss, for Mitchell, definitely. My other league, should I drop Dobbs or pick up either Love or Wilson? I have Howell in that league as well, but he has a bye week. So, yeah, you probably need to drop Dobbs, right? Because you can't – they both have buys. So, I would pick up probably Love. I mean, he's really cooking. Wilson looks good real-life-wise too, but they're just so run-heavy that his fantasy ceiling feels capped, whereas Love is trending the right way now. I know the matchup's tough with Kansas City, but I prefer Love there. You do get Wilson with 2 matchups against the Chargers, actually, the rest of the year too, though. Gun to my head, I'm changing that up. I'm gonna go Wilson. Gracias, Tomas, for being here. Is it worth keeping Dameon Pierce or dropping him for anyone else out there? You can drop Dameon Pierce. He's Singletary's handcuff at this point. And we'll peg it 27 to 30 here. Love to see it. Gonna wrap up the questions in just a second, but thumbs up if you enjoy what you're hearing. Some new names here in the comments. Love to see it. Please do consider subscribing. We're live 4 times a week answering all your questions. Stone Cold Scriber. Which 2 players from this list should I roster ROS? I don't see the list, but please feel free to comment it in again. Join late, missed the defensive rankings, but I'll rewatch Bucks, Jags, and Falcons. Nissan, you nailed them. Those are my 3 guys as well. I think I rank them Falcons, Bucks, then Jags. But honestly, any of those 3 I really, really like. Zach Moss still available in my league. I am number 2 on waiver wire. Yeah, if you can get him, please. Burn any claim, anything you can do to go get him. I had them both. That's for Thomas Taylor there. I had them both, but needed to cut one, to get Kyron off IR. I thought Spears was ready. Oh, yeah. Nope. So go back and go get him. Go get Keaton Mitchell back. Ayuk or Waddle rest of the season. I like Ayuk's schedule, I think, whereas Waddle has the hardest schedule down the playoffs. Pierce is not, yeah, I agree, not worth a roster spot at all. Mr. Comment, I do like Juwan Johnson, and I think I like him over Gerald Everett. He's probably going to be the number 1 passing option in this attack this week and gets a Detroit secondary. It's bad. So, yeah, I do think I like Juwan Johnson more than Everett. Omar, really didn't think it would matter much until JT decided, yeah, I agree to throw it rubbing one out. Yeah, that's the report, right? JT, a big hammer, had it just sledged himself on the thumb there. Rather drop Kenny Pickett over Mims. or Roshan. Yeah, I mean, drop pick. He sucks. Thoughts on Brandon Cooks or over anyone else out there? I like Brandon Cooks over anyone else I talked about tonight. Yeah, I figured he was gone, Nicola. But yes, I think Brandon Cooks is absolutely the top receiver option of anyone I talked about, even more than Jayden Reed, who I love. You're welcome, Surf. Is Godwin drop? Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's very clear. It's the Evans to it's Mayfield and Evans. That's it in this offense. Yeah, I think with those, you can absolutely drop pick it. Giuseppe. I would drop him over anyone else. All right, Wolfpack, that wraps up the mailbag. Thank you so much for all being here. On your way out, please do, again, one last call for that thumbs up to help more people find us. Shares, likes, retweets, all that stuff. Go Holy Cross. Indeed, Nicola. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. We love you guys. Thank you so much. RotoStreetJournal.com is where you can find all our written content, all my rankings, rest of season, weekly, all that good stuff is there for you at RotoStreetJournal.com. You guys are the best. And a world for Fantasy Sheep, guys. Be the wolf. Later.